Hello and Happy New Year. I'll just introduce myself. My name is Damien Callan. Let me just show you who I am. Hello, I'm going to be giving you a short instructional video on drawing some dancers. I will have, with the link to this video, sent you some photographs of a couple of young ballroom dancers and a flamenco dancer, and I'm going to demonstrate two different techniques that you might try. And on Tuesday evening I'm going to be actually doing this again live with you, but for those who want something in advance, here comes a quick demonstration. So I'll start with this drawing. I have this is just sugar paper. It's not white, it's just off-white. And I'm going to use a particular approach. Here's the photograph of my it's actually my son and daughter, two young ballroom dancers. And I want to show you a particular way of working. I have a box of pastels. It's not a very tidy box anymore, inscribed pastels, and I'm going to start with one colour. I'm going to start with the colour of Inez's dress, and I'm drawing with the side of the pastel, and what I'm basically going to do is a kind of silhouette of first her figure and then of her brother's figure, Ivan, but all done with the side of the pastel in the red of the dress. So I hope this is making sense. I'm just sliding it around on the page to draw a kind of silhouette. So I'm not worrying about anything other than the overall shape, and maybe because I'm trying to draw the movement of the dancers, I want to try and get her sort of lean. Maybe the back of her head is a bit further over there. So you can see that I am making some changes. I'm not pressing so hard that the pastel comes out really solidly, but I am making a few changes, like that foot over there. And I will be able to make many more changes as this process goes on. So I've done her, and I've done her approximately. I'm not worrying about, where's the edge of the dress, or I've done too much to the front of her face. I'm just going to trust that this technique will work. And it's a technique that allows for changes and refinements. So there he is, and of course they're a little bit sort of confused, one and the other, but that's okay. So that's the first stage. I've used the side of the red pastel that was the colour of her dress. So now I'm going to take some grey, because I'm going to work with his suit. So let's see, I'm going to start adjusting some of these red shapes, which were Inez's dress, and put in some of the grey shapes, which are Ivan's jacket. So it's a good way of working that allows you just first to look at shapes and not worry too much about exact outlines or perfectly drawn definite lines, but it allows you to gradually find those things to define. Now I've got some charcoal, some willow charcoal. I could have used a black pastel, but I prefer willow charcoal because it's not quite as black as a black pastel. And I'm putting in his black trousers, her black shoe, and he's even got a black bow tie. Then next colour, I've got it's a sort of middle skin colour. I don't know if you see that. It's not the lightest skin colour. I do have a lighter one, which I'm going to, no, that's a white, which I'm going to use in a moment. It's that one, there you go. So I've got a sort of middle skin colour, so that's what I'm going to do next. I'm going to look at these areas of Inez's left arm, and then the bit of her shoulders, the back of her neck, her faces, So that you can see what's quite nice about this stage is because I'm putting this middle skin colour onto the red, makes a really nice mixture. You know, it's giving the hands and faces a good sort of ruddy colouring, some warmth. Another colour. So I'm going to take some brown now for their hair. And each time I do this, I'd said at the beginning I wasn't quite sure if I had her head in the right place. So each time I put a colour on, it's mixing with the red that's underneath. But if I change my mind about the shape, like getting her hair even further back, or getting a slightly different shape to his hair, then having started with the red, I do change things with the colour that I put on top. There's going to be a stage where I work around the outside, so if I've gone too far or not far enough with those colours, then I can still adjust them. So what next? Just a little bit of white. He's got a white shirt on. And a bit of white appears in there. And then this is the lighter skin colour. So she's got light on the back of her neck there. And on the top of her arm. And this is a great stage. I love doing this when you can start to put on the pattern of light. I didn't do his hand. So let's get his hand in here. Not really much light on his hand, maybe a bit on that finger. But some light on his forehead. So I'm gradually starting to get a bit of contrast into these colours. Yes, let's do a quick more bit to her dress. And now I'm sort of pressing a little bit harder, so I'm filling this dress in slightly more solidly. Now, because it's dance, I'm showing you a way really of building up these figures, but there are certain aspects to this subject of dance which I maybe should pay attention to. The movement of the clothes. So Inez loves this dress because it really does sort of sweep and swirl. So I've got to get all of these sort of curves and even some of the flowing lines. And if I get them, then I'm going to make these figures move more. The position of the head I already mentioned. I was trying to get that right because in dance, you know, heads and hands are in these dynamic positions. Right, so they're filled in a bit there, working with the figures. Now I'm going to do a little bit to the background because I want to introduce some colour which will help them stand out. But it'll also help me work a bit on these edges. You know, maybe I want to bring in her waist a little bit and bring out her bottom to get that sort of swirl of the dress. The space between them here, that's a chance for me to refine her face a little bit. I might go back to the skin colours for that. So putting on a background colour, working a bit with a negative shape, making these colours stand out, but also refining those figures. So two more things I'm going to do. One would be to get a bit of floor in for the same reasons. Well, yeah, to adjust some of to use the negative shape to adjust the shape of the figures, but also actually to give them something to stand on, to ground them. The other thing I can do, start with the floor. I've got my willow charcoal again. I'm going to darken some of that floor colour because I think very often when you're working with dancers, figures, you can use some shadow quite effectively. In fact, they've got a bit of a shadow on the wall over here. Quite interested in that. I might mix that a bit with the pastel colours. And I can even get a little bit of charcoal into their dresses, or her dress, if I want to get a little bit more contrast in those colours. Or I could just go to a different red. Is that too strong? Let's try it. Get a bit more light onto her dress. This is getting really... That isn't quite the colour of her dress, but it's quite nice to get a little bit more brightness. Okay, so that's one way that you might try working with... I started with one colour and I put in a kind of silhouette for both figures, and then I just drew directly into that silhouette. The other way of working, which I would like to demonstrate here, which you can see here with the flamenco dancer, this time I'm working on white paper, white cartridge paper, and I'm starting with some willow charcoal, and I'm covering the page with willow charcoal. This is going to be what's called a charcoal rub away drawing. So I just smudge that into the page, and with my bit of willow charcoal I'm going to do something fairly similar to what I did with the ballroom dancers. So I've got a picture of a terrific flamenco dancer that I've worked with in classes, and I'm going to use the charcoal, the willow charcoal. I've got quite a thick stick here, just to get the overall shape, I mean you could call it a silhouette, of her pose. And it's a fantastic pose, this, and the costume as well, the dress that she wears really sort of accentuates the movement in that that dance pose. So I'm doing a certain amount of sort of blocking in the shape like I did with the pastel, but I'm also doing lines. It's fine to do either, but I want to get the kind of curving back and forth shape that she's making with this pose. So that's probably good enough for me to then take an eraser, a rubber, and start subtracting. So I said it's called a charcoal rub away drawing, and instead of working with the shape of the dancer, I'm going to rub away the negative shape of some of the spaces around her. So for example, the space under her chin, so actually maybe that head could go a bit higher. I'll push up some of that charcoal with my finger, and so could that hair. So I'm taking away what's around her figure. So this is a really good thing to do, rather than just draw the positive shape, which you'll probably know very often when we draw the positive shape of a figure, of a hand or a leg or a foot. We stop looking at what's there and we start drawing what we think is meant to be there. So when you work with a negative shape, it's a really good way of seeing what's there without, I suppose, without overriding what you're seeing and trying to impose something that you think should be there. So the negative shape, subtracting this willow charcoal with the rubber, means that I can make this figure stand out. And it's worth, as I did with the ballroom dancers, take off some of the, get a sort of pattern. Oh dear. I've been, when I'm doing the wall or what's behind her, I'm just going up and down, making a certain sort of pattern to the background. It looks a bit like curtains. And then when I get down here more towards her ankles, I'm going a bit more horizontal, just to suggest the floor. So that's working with the charcoal and the rubber. I'm now going to take some hairspray as a fixative, and I'm going to spray this charcoal, which will fix it, it'll seal it, so that that charcoal can't be smudged. It can't really be rubbed out very easily. I'll show you that in a moment. I'm just going to pause the video because it really needs to wait for a couple of minutes to dry. Okay, I think that's dry now. So I sprayed it with the fixative. You would have seen me smudging it before I sprayed it. Now that I've sprayed it, that doesn't really smudge. There's a tiny bit, but barely. So what the fixative does, the hairspray, is it seals in that layer of charcoal so that it won't smudge and it won't come off really. So now I'm going to take some colours, and maybe I'll just start with her hair actually, and I'm going to just draw on top. So I'm using the pastels again, and I'm doing a combination of some lines, maybe a bit of an outline to the shape of the hair, but also a bit of texture. She's got long curly hair, something for the red top, and this red top is sort of lacy, so in places the red might be more solid, in others I might leave gaps. And because of this charcoal underdrawing that I've fixed, I can also, if I don't put the pastel on too solidly, I can let some of that charcoal show through. So that's quite nice. That'll give me, I can make it a bit thicker over here where it's very red at her back. But as we get to the front and the shadows, maybe I'll let some of that black show through. Same colours as I used before. I've got this sort of middle skin colour. So I'll use that basically to get a bit of warmth into her face. I'm even leaving a bit of a gap there so that the charcoal shows through where her eye is, where it's dark, and where there are other shadows on her face. And I could then take my, don't do that yet. Take my lighter skin colour, and then she's got some nice light on her cheek and her temple, on the front of the nose, on her ear, and here on her shoulder. So I can mix a little bit of that on the drawing. And her skirt, of course. So again, I'm following some of the outlines, some of the shape that I started with, leaving a few gaps where there are shadows, but also changing it. And I've realised now actually maybe it's a little bit longer. So I think it's good to be ready to change things. And into that green, maybe I'll get a little bit of a lighter green. There are certain places on her hips, on the top of her leg there, where it's quite nice to have some of that lighter colour. And yes, a little bit to her legs. And of course those red shoes, important. We're saying again about dance, there are elements of the costume that convey movement, and also in the case of flamenco, it's all very dramatic. So these bright colours can be part of that effect. And as I did with the previous one, I'll find a background colour. Just a grey really, because I think it's quite good. That's not making much difference. That would have been alright, but I just thought it'd be quite nice if you could see better what I'm doing. So I just thought again, having used the rubber to create some of these negative spaces, I can now even introduce some colour. And maybe it's time to do something on the floor. So that's another way of working, and I would go on certainly getting a bit more colour into this background and doing a few more things perhaps to get some light onto the hair or so on. So that's the second way of drawing that I'd encourage you to do. So for all of that you'll need some, this one was on white paper with willow charcoal, then the pastel on top. The other was one on off-white paper. It doesn't have to be off-white paper. And I'd worked with that box of pastels. So I hope that's useful to you. I'm providing you with the photographs, and I will see you, some of you, on Tuesday when I'll demonstrate these techniques again. And maybe if you have seen the video, it might you might have some questions. So you can talk to me as I demonstrate, or we can look at how you might want to take these techniques in your own direction. Okay, see you on Tuesday. Bye bye.